Hello, today we'll be talking about athletes and steroids. So the question I chose to talk about is, although it is against most laws to do so, some professional athletes and bodybuilders use anabolic steroid drugs to improve their athletic performance and physique. What are your thoughts on athletes and doping? Do you believe the use of performance-enhancing drugs should be banned? Why or why not? What advice would you give an athlete who's considering using PEDs? Be sure to address the endocrine system as you build your response. So let's begin with the introduction. What inspired me to choose this theme and what importance does it hold for me? This is a very big topic and debate in the sports world. Athletes are very competitive and want to be the best, so anabolic steroids help them improve. I think this topic is very important because a lot of athletes do this and it's not fair to those who are doing the work themselves without help. I love sports and have played sports for the majority of my life. I think learning about the ethics behind taking anabolic steroids is important. I also want to learn more about the impact on one's health from taking these steroids on a regular basis. How did I locate the research needed to build the presentation? I located the research needed from the school library in order to find readings, and I also went online to find scholarly articles and journals. So these are my sources. I'm just going to name them. Anabolic steroids from Department of Health and Human Services, Doping in Sports Endocrinology, Anabolic Androgenic Steroids, the English version by Garcia Arnaz and Garcia Casares, Fake Anabolic Androgenic Steroids on the Black Market, a systematic review and meta-analysis on qualitative and quantitative analytical results found within the literature by Magnolini, Falcato, Cremonesi, and others, Anabolic Androgenic Steroid Use and Psychopathology in Athletes, a systematic review by Piacentino, Gonzalez, Del Casale, and others, the uses of anabolic androgenic steroids among athletes, its positive and negative aspects, a literature review by Wenbo and Yan, and Psychology by Myers and DeWall. So for my research objectives and hypothesis, the goals of the research are to answer the following questions. What are the effects of anabolic steroids? What are the pros and cons of using anabolic steroids? Should PEDs be banned in sports? And what advice can be given to athletes who are considering using PEDs? Now it's time for the literature review. What I hoped to find from relevant research. I hope to find more information about all the ways anabolic steroids affects people's health. This is both physical and psychological, which I haven't really heard about before. I also want to know more about how it works with the endocrine system. What theoretical frameworks are used to convey and explain the topic? The theoretical framework used to convey and explain the topic will be a biopsychosocial approach. This will provide more understanding to a person's health by considering biological, psychological, and social factors. These are the things that correlate to why athletes use anabolic steroids, or the effects, and how do the steroids work. Research approaches I found from the sources. For the source, Fake Anabolic Androgenic Steroids on the Black Market, a systematic review and meta-analysis on qualitative and quantitative analytical results found in the literature, it used qualitative research and quantitative research. They reviewed literature that assessed the quality and quantity of anabolic steroids found on the black market. The uses of anabolic androgenic steroids among athletes, its positive and negative aspects, a literature review. They discussed molecular mechanisms, physiological process, and clinical complications arising from the excessive use of anabolic steroids among athletes. They used qualitative research. For doping in sports endocrinology, anabolic androgenic steroids, they used a qualitative research, and they described the historical background of anabolic steroids, classification, forms of use, physiological effects, adverse effects on different organs and systems, treatment of hypogonadism, as well as detection methods. And for anabolic androgenic steroid use and psychopathology in athletes, a systematic review, they used quantitative research. And they did research on if anabolic steroids cause eating and psychiatric disorders. What these findings represent for my research. These findings show the dangers of anabolic steroids physically, psychologically, and buying it online. Some help show the physicality of it with the endocrine system and how it is affected by the steroids. Now let's get into the discussion. For the key findings, I found that the endocrine system contains glands and fat tissues that secrete another form of chemical messenger hormones. Anabolic steroids work by imitating the properties of naturally occurring hormones. Their chemical composition is similar to testosterone and can activate the body's testosterone receptors. Once the receptors are stimulated, a domino effect of metabolic reactions takes place as the drug instructs the body to increase muscle tissue production. One effect of testosterone on the body is anabolic. This maintains bone density, supports muscle growth, and speeds up recovery from injury. The administration of androgen suppresses the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, and if use is prolonged, the resulting hypogonadism can last for months and years after suspending treatment, 45 with symptoms such as erectile dysfunction and decreased libido. Anabolic steroid use in athletes is associated with mood and anxiety disturbances as well as reckless behavior. Development of specific psychopathology, increased aggressiveness, mood destabilization, eating behavior abnormalities, and psychosis is associated with anabolic steroid abuse. Physiologically, AAS can disrupt the body's natural hormone balance, leading to a plethora of complications such as cardiovascular issues, liver damage, and reproductive system abnormalities. A substantial amount of black market anabolic steroids are counterfeit and of substandard quality. Although anabolic steroid abuse has been linked to many disorders affecting different organs in the body, it is interesting to observe that the effects of AAS have remained largely positive on bone growth. Reports on damaged tendons or ligaments exist, yet the effects of AAS remain largely beneficial for the skeletal system. The misuse of anabolic steroids can also impact an athlete's credibility and tarnish the integrity of sports. The unlevel playing field created by doping can undermine the principles of fair competition, eroding the essence of sportsmanship. For my implications of the research, I found that it would gain further knowledge into both the positive and negative effects of anabolic steroid use, both mental and physical. It would help understand how anabolic steroid use can be cheating and unfair in sports. It can help provide advice and knowledge to athletes thinking of using anabolic steroids. For limitations of the study, the only limitation that I had was that I could not find a source that offered advice to athletes who are considering using anabolic steroids. I believe that this is important to talk about because it can help prevent athletes from using them and damaging their body. If advice is not discussed, athletes will continue to use these drugs without thinking of other options. Suggestions for future research. I suggest that future research should look into if advice given to athletes impact if they use anabolic steroids or not. I question if athletes knew about alternatives or the effects of anabolic steroids, would they choose to not use it? I think research on the comparison between athletes who were given no advice or knowledge on anabolic steroids and athletes who were given these factors would impact their decision to use them or not. Finally, the conclusion. For summary of key points, the sources used both qualitative and quantitative research. They reviewed literature about black market anabolic steroids, described the historical background of anabolic steroids and their effect on organs and systems, discussed molecular mechanisms, physiological processes, and clinical complications arising from the abuse of anabolic steroids among athletes, and did research on if anabolic steroids cause eating and psychiatric disorders. Just to reiterate some of the key findings, anabolic steroids imitate naturally occurring hormones, and by acting as testosterone, it maintains bone density and supports muscle growth. The effects of anabolic steroids abuse can be seen in both physical and mental ways. Physically, the effects are cardiovascular issues, liver damage, and reproductive system abnormalities. Mentally, the effects are increased aggressiveness, mood destabilization, eating behavior abnormalities, and psychosis. A substantial amount of black market anabolic steroids are counterfeit and of substandard quality. Anabolic steroids, although mainly bad for a person's health, can be beneficial for the skeletal system. The use of anabolic steroids by athletes tarnishes the integrity of sports and undermines the principles of fair competition. From the findings, we can conclude that anabolic steroid use is substantially dangerous to athletes. Not only is real anabolic steroids dangerous, fake and black market anabolic steroids can be even more harmful. It is, however, beneficial for the skeletal system in some instances. We can conclude that anabolic steroid use in athletes should not happen because of the risk to their health and the unfairness it brings to sports. My opinion. I very much disagree with athletes using anabolic steroids. I believe that the use of performance-enhancing drugs should be banned. I think this is unfair for athletes who don't use these drugs. Anabolic steroids help build muscle mass and help improve athletic performance. This is a drug, and drugs are banned almost everywhere, and why should the category of sports allow athletes to use them? For one, it is unfair for athletes who try to better themselves organically rather than with the help of drugs. And second, they have a lot of negative effects that can be prevalent for months or years, and it's not safe for athletes to use them, especially when they do so for a long period of time. The advice I would give to an athlete who is considering using PEDs would be, rather than looking at the good part of using anabolic steroids, like winning a competition, look at the negative part of it, like cardiovascular issues and liver damage. Final thoughts. I think my research is helpful in understanding both the physical and mental effects anabolic steroids have on athletes. It is important to know how the things we are putting in our bodies affects us. It is also important to bring up the dangers of using fake anabolic steroids as well. My work shows athletes that taking anabolic steroids don't work in the long run. They can cause lots of long-term damage and is not worth it just to win a few competitions. It also shows them that taking the steroids is unfair to other athletes who work on themselves naturally, and it demeans the meaning of sports. These are my references. Thank you.